In this 21st century world, we see many things that are different from before, not necessarily better or worse, but different. Yet the more we look at things, the more we see that there is really nothing new under the sun. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Look at the cars we drive. In the old days, we drove really big cars here in America, and our European friends used to shake their heads at those gas guzzlers. Those were the days of big families, and we would pile the whole family into a big station wagon. Then we were told to conserve on gas, so we started driving smaller cars like the rest of the world. Now, in the 21st century, when the size of the family is smaller than ever before, what are we driving? SUVs. We're back to square one. Some things really never change. Look at the way we used to communicate with one another. People used to actually speak to one another, imagine that, or maybe write a letter. Now you take out your telephone and with your thumb you text the briefest message possible using the most indecipherable abbreviations. But isn't that exactly what we used to do when we sent telegrams? Some things remain always the same. Then look at all the tattoos. It wasn't all that long ago that a tattoo attracted attention because it was a rare phenomenon. The author Jack London used to say, "Show me a man with a tattoo and I'll show you a man with an interesting past." In those days, of course, it was only men who got them. In our day, however, you see them everywhere and on every type of person. Surveys show that a full 50% of young people between the ages of 18 and 29 sport at least one tattoo. A few years ago, I ran into a musician friend whom I had not seen in several years. I noticed hanging beneath the sleeve of his t-shirt the portrait of someone who looked very familiar. I asked, "Is that your father's face I see tattooed on your arm?" With that, he took off his shirt and said, "Here's my dad, here's my mom, and look at all these other people." I remembered he had been very close to his grandmother, whom I had buried several years before. I looked around for Grandma, and sure enough, there she was, crawling up his leg. His body was a veritable family tree with the names or faces of all these people. I asked, "Didn't all these tattoos hurt?" He said, "Well, yes, some of them hurt quite a bit, depending on where they were put. But I embrace the pain because I want to have a remembrance of the important people in my life, the people who made me the person I am." Well, that's one way of doing it, I suppose. "But I can give you one word of advice," he said. "Don't tattoo the names of any girlfriends onto your skin, because the ink tends to last a lot longer than the romance. And trust me, it's quite painful to remove either one." When tattoos first came into vogue, I didn't know what to think about this seemingly indelible mutilation. Then I went to a marvelous place called Tahiti. In those splendid islands, many people are decorated with tattoos, using beautiful and elaborate designs with a lot of meaning. It's a very ancient practice in those islands. In fact, the very word tattoo comes from the Tahitian language. Because there was no writing in the traditional Polynesian culture, the people used this art, full of distinctive signs, to express their identity and personality. In days gone by, nearly everyone there was tattooed. It was a sacred art performed by the priests, who were highly trained in the religious ritual of it all. in the meaning of the elaborate designs, and in the technical aspects of applying the ink. The designs and the location on the body were determined by a person's genealogy, status, and personal achievement. The first tattoo was received at adolescence as a sign of passing from childhood to adulthood. As a person got older, other tattoos were added. The more tattoos, the more prestige the person enjoyed. Chiefs and warriors generally had the most elaborate, the most beautiful, or we might say, the most grotesque ones. If a person had no tattoo, they were looked down upon, whereas those whose bodies were completely covered were greatly admired. Shortly after the missionaries arrived, the practice was strictly forbidden, as were all the other ancient customs, including their beautiful dances. But in modern times, the people of Polynesia have had a revival of this ancient art and many others from their old culture. It is beautiful to see. Tattooing goes back a long time. In 1991, an amazing discovery was made in the mountains between Austria and Italy, the discovery of a frozen mummy that has come to be known as Ötzi, the Iceman. Ötzi is 5,300 years old, and he is the first instance we have seen of a human being covered head to foot with tattoos. It is not known what these ancient tattoos meant, but they are certainly there. Inscribing things onto our bodies is an interesting phenomenon with an interesting mentality behind it. The actor Johnny Depp likes to say, "My body is my journal and my tattoos are my story." Each of us has a story. Our tattoo, our journal, our story does not have to be an outward one, inscribed with ink and needle into the naked flesh. The deepest tattoos, the most lasting inscriptions, are those etched not on the body, but on the soul. What and who do we have inscribed on our lives? How painful was the experience? How much has it colored our being, our way of living? How visible is it to others around us? Getting those tattoos of the soul is painful, yet beautiful, just like life itself. The beauty does not often come without the pain. We do not get these inscriptions on our soul without embracing the sacrifice that comes with making that identity, that relationship, that image our own. Let us be very careful what we take on as a permanent mark on our being. When people see us in all our spiritual nakedness, they will instinctively, unconsciously ask the very question posed by the Christ. Whose image is this, and whose inscription? Let us not fear to take on the one image of which our human nature is worthy, the one image which perfectly mirrors our own. Let us not fear to bear on our lives for all the world to see the magnificent image and indelible mark of God.